All right, guys, welcome back to another edition of the Night Report podcast. A little weird this week because I never do the intro and Mike usually does it. But regardless, we replaced him with a pretty well-known character, I guess we can call him, in Alex Gleitman. Alex, what's going on?
What's up, Richie? I'm excited. It's the Gleitman Bowl this week, Rutgers and Ohio State. I cover both teams for those who don't know, so it's always a fun week, answering questions on my Ohio State site about Rutgers, questions on, obviously, our site about Ohio State. I know this one hasn't been too competitive since Rutgers joined the Big Ten, but hoping that Schiano just continues to do work and make it a more competitive game year after year because it's always fun for me.
Yeah, so he obviously had some interesting comments going in on Monday, and it seems like some of the Ohio State beat writers are picking it up a little bit. Instead of saying, like, hey, we're going to go in and give our best effort, he goes, we're going to win, and we're going to try that. Now, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I found it a little bit interesting. I know you got to hype your team up, but you're not going to win.
I mean, I'd be pissed if I was if I'm a Rutgers fan and my coach isn't saying that, I'd be angry because they're not playing these games. I mean, look, we know the spread's 41 points. We know what the history is. We know the talent, disparity between these teams, but things happen. To quote Little Giants, one time. You're playing 60 minutes of football. If you can play better than Ohio State for 60 minutes of football, you got a shot. And to not have that mentality would be a failure. You don't want someone leading your program that doesn't have that mentality. So I love that Greg Schiano came out and said that. Whether he truly believes that in his heart, I don't know. But that's got to be the mentality he and all the players, all the way down to the support staff, have entering this game. Otherwise, they have no shot before they even step on the field.
Yeah, so before we get into a little in-depth of talking about the Ohio State offense and defense, I got to ask you, you obviously covered Ohio State for a long time now. What's your best Schiano story from his time there?
Oh, man.
I know you might get in trouble a little bit because,
I'll stay away from getting in trouble, but I'll say that I just think this is a cool story. Like, Greg Schiano, he's been hurt in the NFL, so I don't know how many people are that familiar with him. But Malik Hooker was a first-round pick of the Indianapolis Colts, and I just think Greg had a lot of equity with Urban Meyer when it came to recruiting takes and things like that. And Malik Hooker was someone that Greg pounded the table to make sure that he got on the field, and his first year as defensive coordinator. So Greg didn't. I think Luke Fickell recruited Malik out of Pittsburgh, but in his first year, Greg came in and implemented his system, and Malik Hooker, who hadn't barely played before that 2016 season, he put him in at his free safety position, and Malik had as far as I've been watching Ohio State football since 2000, religiously since 2004. And it was the best year of any safety, maybe any defensive back I've ever seen at Ohio State. Malik basically was on the field for 1 year, left early for the NFL, first-round pick of the Colts. He's had some injury troubles, but I think he's starting again for the Cowboys, if my memory serves me correctly. So I just thought it was really cool how Greg came in, recognized talent, especially for his system, helped develop Malik into a first-round pick, and basically turned around the kid's entire life. So I would say that just that little antidote was probably one of the cooler things that I saw during Greg's his 3 years at Ohio State.
Yeah, 3 years or something like that. It's interesting, but let's dive into this team a little bit. Heisman candidates up and down the offense pretty much. So just tell me a little bit about the Ohio State offense that's pretty much running on all cylinders.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because if you watch the Notre Dame game, they weren't really running on all cylinders.
Yeah.
And I think it's a few factors. I think, you come out the gates and it's opening day. You got a little rush. You got a little nervousness. Maybe Notre Dame's throwing some things at you that you didn't expect. Jackson Smith-Njigba went down in the middle of that game with a hamstring injury that's basically hampered him the entire season up until this point. And so while Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka did play a little bit as freshmen last year, they didn't play a ton. They had to bring in a former walk-on Xavier Johnson as kind of the guy they trusted the most to be that slot receiver. So it was kind of a different group than C.J. Stroud's used to practicing with. I think that factored into it. They have on the offensive line, they had they've had Luke Whippler's kind of the mainstay from last year's group in the center. The other 4 starters are either playing a new position than they played last year or they're new starters. So they obviously needed to gel and still need to gel to get to kind of reach their full potential. But that was their first game playing together in all of those positions. And so it looked a little clunky, I think, out the gates. Not to mention that, I know Notre Dame, people are laughing at them now, but they came into the year with a pretty well-respected defense, if nothing else, right? Yeah. So I think all those factors you put into consideration. It looked a little clunky. Arkansas State, game 2, it looked a little better. Toledo, they absolutely exploded for 77 points. And then last week against Wisconsin, they just looked awesome. They are rolling on all cylinders. C.J. Stroud, I would consider him, when you talk about NFL prospects, I think he's the best NFL quarterback prospect in the country. When you talk about college quarterbacks, it's probably him or Bryce Young. He's only improved from last year, which is scary for opponents, obviously. He's gotten a little bit better as far as his mobility. He's gotten in better shape. He's escaping the pocket a lot better and creating plays that should be, negative plays or losses. So he's been really good this year. He's been really accurate. He threw 1 interception at the end of the half last week that kind of was a little bit of a boneheaded play as they were trying to get down the field and score some more points before the break. But I think he's got like 16 touchdowns to 1 interception, something like that. He's been absolutely outstanding. Running backs, they got a 2-headed monster. Trevion Henderson, Mayan Williams, both of them have been fantastic. Henderson came in with a little bit more hype, but I think Williams has actually been the better back this year. But they've both been really good. And I think the reason for that is that offensive line we talked about. They've started to kind of gel and come together and play really well. But I think Rutgers' defensive line will pose a little bit of a challenge. I like that unit for Rutgers, so we'll see how they do. And then at wide receiver, I'm not expecting Jackson Smith-Njigba back this week. I think they're going to rest him again until that hamstring gets 100% healthy. But Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka have been really, really good for Ohio State. And then the other guy who they didn't have for Notre Dame that is back is Julian Fleming, former number 1 overall recruit, 5-star, number 1 receiver. He's back in the mix. He's played pretty well the last 2 weeks. So those are the 3 receivers. Speedster Jaden Ballard's kind of a deep threat that they use as the 4th receiver. But it will mainly be those 3 guys. And then the guy I have not mentioned that has really emerged as a very surprising playmaker has been Cade Stover. Cade Stover is the starting tight end for Ohio State. They do play a lot of 12 personnel, so they do use 2 tight ends a lot. But Stover's been the pass-catching tight end. He caught a couple touchdowns last week against Wisconsin. He's had multiple catches in every single game, and that's surprising because kind of the joke around Ohio State fans is this going to be the year of the tight end? I mean, they've had some really good tight ends that have went on to play in the NFL. Jake Stoneburner, Jeff Hireman, Nick Vanette's still in the NFL, Marcus Baugh, Luke Farrell's with the Jaguars, and then most recently, for all my Jets fans out there, Jeremy Ruckert was drafted in the 3rd round this year. But despite having, I think, every single tight end that Ohio State has had going back to like 20 years or so has ended up on an NFL roster. Yet none of them are really featured in the offense. And it's probably because they have such great running backs. They have such great receivers. There's only one ball to go around, right? But this year, all of a sudden, Cade Stover, the guy who converted from a linebacker last year, has become an elite pass-catching tight end for Ohio State. So he's definitely someone to look out for on Saturday as an additional threat in this passing game.
So is that basically what I guess the game plan would be? Would basically just pass the ball on this Rutgers secondary? Obviously, that's probably Rutgers' best unit, mind you, but I know it's still obviously Ohio State versus Rutgers at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I think Ohio State last year became a little too pass happy. Their offensive line, they played Thayer Munford, who's starting for the Raiders now at tackle. They played him at guard, and they played Paris Johnson, who's the current starting left tackle, at guard. Their goal was to try to get the best 5 on the field. So Nick Petit-Frere, who's starting for the Titans, was the right tackle. Was the left tackle, and DeJuan Jones, who's starting at right tackle again, was the starting right tackle. And so they basically played 2 guards at center, 2 tackles at guard last year in order to get the best 5 on the field. But I don't think, while they might be the best 5 individual talents, I don't think that they were the best 5 group of talent because they did really well in pass protection, but they struggled a little bit in the run game. And I think, especially on the interior line where you need to play with a little bit more leverage, play a little bit lower, get a little bit more push, they struggled a little bit, especially in the short running game. So this year you have 2 true guards playing guard, Matthew Jones from Erasmus Hall at right guard, Donovan Jackson, former 5-star recruit, at left guard. And I think that that's really helped bolster the running game. And I think Ryan Day kind of took a step back and said, we need to be able to lean on our running game a little bit more this year. So I think so far you're seeing a little bit more balance between the run game and pass game. And, I think that makes Ohio State that much more dangerous. If you're Rutgers and you want to stop Ohio State, or at least slow them down, you need to be able to stop that run game. So I think Ohio State's going to try to come out with a balanced attack against Rutgers. And if Rutgers can't stop one of those, I mean, it's going to be a long day for that defense.
Yeah, so now I want to flip I can't even talk. On the flip side of things, Ohio State's defense has been pretty well, and it's littered with New Jersey guys between Baptiste, Simon, Hickman. Is this unit just basically going to dominate this Rutgers offense that's probably second worst in the Big Ten this year so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Ohio State wiped out their whole defensive staff other than Larry Johnson, the defensive line coach, and they brought in Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State. They brought in Tim Walton from the NFL to coach cornerbacks. Perry Eliano, who did a great job coaching Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant last year at Cincinnati, is the safeties coach. Knowles is coaching the linebackers, but he brought a couple kind of, I guess you'll call them support staffers from Oklahoma State that help out with that as well. And then he also brought grad transfer Tanner McAllister from Oklahoma State, who's almost like an on-field coach. Ohio State plays a 4-2-5, so he plays the third safety position, which is kind of that slot safety position. And the new scheme, the new disguising looks, not just showing the same look every single play like Kerry Combs did. I mean, it's really made a big difference. And as you mentioned, the New Jersey guys, I mean, they're playing really good ball. Cody Simon doesn't technically start at linebacker, but he plays a lot. Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Tyler Friday are 2 defensive end. They're reserves. They don't start, but they get in the rotation, and they rotate through a lot. Ronnie Hickman is one of the starting safeties, and he's been very, very good for Ohio State. So, those New Jersey guys, Greg Schiano recruited actually a bunch of them to Ohio State. He's probably regretting that a little bit now, but they play a big role in this new defense, which is very aggressive, plays very fast. They fly to the ball. I know it's hard because Ohio State's defense actually played really well in the Rutgers game last year, so Rutgers fans' memory might be of a good defense last year, but if you watched Ohio State against Michigan or Utah or Oregon last year, you could see really where those holes were, and I think that you're not going to see that this year. It's a completely different philosophy, mentality, use of the players, use of the personnel, and so far, so good. Now, they are susceptible to some big plays, I'll say. Jim Knowles admits, we build in 5 explosive plays against us a game. We're willing to give up 5 explosive plays in exchange for our aggressiveness, and we still feel that will help us execute the game plan. Now, an explosive play doesn't necessarily mean a score, right? It just means a big gain of whatever, 20, 30 yards. But I think Rutgers, when they have the ball, they need, Sean Gleason, it's going to be on him, a game of chess to some extent, trying to find those spots where Ohio State maybe is a little over-aggressive, and how do you take advantage of those, right? So those plays are built in, and we haven't seen 5 explosive plays in a single game against Ohio State this year because it takes the perfect play call, the execution, all of that with the timing to make it happen. So that's kind of a high view recap of the defense. But, yeah, the New Jersey guys certainly have helped out.
Yeah, so now you kind of mentioned there's not really any holes in this defense. If there was one specific hole, is there anything that this Rutgers offense could really attack?
Yeah, I mean, I think cornerback this year has surprisingly been a little bit of a hole. There's injuries. So Denzel Burke, who emerged as a freshman starter last year and was kind of coming in as probably their best NFL draft prospect at the position, he actually he wasn't great before last week, and then he missed last week's game. He's got some sort of hand injury. It will probably keep him out this week. Cam Brown, who's a starter, the other starter, actually missed last week against Wisconsin as well. He has been playing well. He's questionable to be back this week. I kind of think he will be, but he may not be. Jordan Hancock will not be back. He was supposed to be the 3rd cornerback for this team, a former 5-star recruit out of Georgia. They expected big things out of him this year, and so far, he hasn't been able to get on the field with a calf injury he suffered in the preseason. So last week against Wisconsin, they started sophomore J.K. Johnson, who's played a little bit, and then they started true freshman Jair Brown at cornerback. They actually both played pretty well against Wisconsin. I mean, against the Badgers, you're stopping the run game, and then after that, if they're one-dimensional, things get a little bit easier. But I would say, just given all that, who may play, who may not play, they do leave the cornerbacks on an island quite often. So I think all that into consideration, that's probably the one area where I would say Rutgers should be trying to attack, moving forward.
Now, obviously, Rutgers has a couple notable kick returners and specialists in, I guess, at every position on special teams, pretty much. Punter, kicker, Cruikshank, Youngblood, etc. Is there any chance? I know this unit for Ohio State's been ranked, top 25 for the past couple seasons on special teams. Is there any chance they'd be able to kind of get something going there that doesn't involve an 11-person lateral?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Ohio State's been kicking out of the end zone a lot more this year than they have in years past. They used to kind of do that play where they kick a high ball right into the corner at around like inside the 5-yard line, and then try to pin you inside the 20 or 25, I guess, if you choose to take it out. And they're usually very successful with that. We saw the lateral try to kind of counter that in the past from Rutgers and a few other teams. But I think Ohio State, especially knowing how explosive Aaron Cruikshank is in the return game, they'll try to kick it away from him or out of bounds as much as possible. I mean, there's a huge talent differential in this game. I don't think anyone can argue that. Why give Rutgers an opportunity to get good field position or maybe make an explosive play in special teams to make this game closer than it needs to be? So I think you'll see Ohio State probably kick it out of the end zone a lot. And then Jesse Mirko, their punter, may not be as good as Rutgers punter, but he's pretty darn good. He's in his second year out of Australia, so he's a little bit older, a little bit more mature. He's done very well in his year plus at Ohio State now. He's been punting it really well, but I imagine kind of they'll tell him, don't give Rutgers a chance to make any plays in the return game. Even if we have to kick it a little shorter, let's play the field position game. Let's be smart about it. But yeah, I mean, if you're Rutgers, that's an area where you feel you have to win in this game is special teams if you want a chance to win this game.
Yeah, so like you mentioned before in the beginning, 41-point spread. I think it's probably changing almost daily at this point, going up or down, but most likely up. But is there any way you see Rutgers possibly, any way in shape or form, winning this game? I know it's very tough to project. Is there a situation where you think maybe everything just has to bounce the correct way? Is that what it is, or?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's cliche, but win the turnover battle, win the time of possession, and I think that is key, right? Like being able to shorten this game and make it a slugfest and a street fight versus a track meet. I think that's really important for Rutgers. The offensive line is gonna be a big part of that. Can they move Ohio State's defensive line and run the ball successfully? If they can, they can shorten this game, move the ball down the field, move the chains, keep Ohio State's defense on their feet, pick up some points, whether it's field goals. I mean, I think you need 7s, not 3s in this game if you want to win it. Yeah. But, field goals, couple touchdowns here and there, and try to make this like a lower scoring affair. That's probably Rutgers' best chance. But they got to play a clean game. Limit the penalties, no turnovers, win the battle at the line of scrimmage as much as possible, time of possession, and then, couple plays here or there, they need to hit, as I talked about. Ohio State builds explosive plays into that defense to give up. Rutgers has to take advantage of those moments. That's really the way that this game is a game in the fourth quarter, in my opinion. It's hard to see any result other than Ohio State winning by a pretty significant margin. But if Rutgers wants to do it, as I said, one time, 60 minutes, this is their opportunity. So you gotta try to execute your game plan.
Yeah. So with that being said, give us a game prediction. Obviously, we'll see it in the war room tomorrow, but.
Yeah, I mean, I hate doing this because I love my Rutgers people, but again, I don't see Rutgers offense, like, even if they limit Ohio State's offense to like 28 points, even 20 points, which would be their season low.
That is a win.
Can Rutgers score 20 points against this Ohio State team to win the game, or 21 points? I just don't see it. I think it's going to be tough sledding. I think it's going to get ugly pretty quickly, similar to last year. And I know people are going to be surprised that I even say Rutgers with 13 points, but I think Ohio State, I think they'll be able to get a couple field goals early and maybe a touchdown later in the game against the backups. I'm going to say Ohio State 52, Rutgers 13.
Okay. Right, that's about right. I think it's with the spread and everything, it's pretty close.
They cover the spread, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
That's accurate. So now
Can't
while I
bet
have
on,
you on,
we can't bet on Rutgers in New Jersey, but I'll say
I
take the
know.
points. Why not?
Yeah. But since I have you on here, and you are one of the Rutgers recruiting analysts, I want to talk a little bit about Rutgers recruiting real quick. They obviously hosted a bunch of big name 2024s last week for the night game versus Iowa. What are you hearing on 2024? Since it seems like 2023 is kind of done for the most part, minus Portal.
Yeah, I mean, 2023. I mean, they just lost Jason DeClona. So do they try to, replace him? Right? I mean, maybe. Namdi's out there on the defensive line. That's a guy that they could go after. There's a few other names that I think probably will pop onto our scene or reappear onto our scene that they'll look at. I don't think that they're completely done, but I do think Rutgers' fastest way to become competitive is probably use a bunch of those spots and go to the portal like they did this past season to try to help their offensive line and some other spots kind of where they see fit. So I kind of agree with you. You're probably looking at maximum 3-4 more guys, maybe, and probably not even that many added to this class for 23. I would love to see them add a quarterback just because look at what's happening right now. I mean, the depth is an issue, and I think they need to. We've talked about this. I think they need to recruit a quarterback every single year. So I would go out and get a quarterback and maybe 2 or 3 other players to kind of be in this high school class, and then fill the rest with the portal. And I think the good thing about the position they're in is it's allowed them to focus a little bit more on 24, 25s, evaluate the film, send out some offers, host those guys on visits. And, the program's not exactly where they want it to be just quite yet, but I think the message that they're conveying to some of these younger guys is resonating. So I do see a positive outlook for the future of Rutgers recruiting, even if this 23 class on paper right now from a high school perspective doesn't look all that great at the moment.
I want to mention a little bit about that 2024 class. You're big in the New York recruiting scene. New York, is this the best recruiting class ever in New York in 2024? Because it seems like they just have a lot of top-tier guys. Maybe not that one level, like high-level guy, but it seems like there's a bunch of Power 5 dudes now throughout New York.
Yeah, there's depth. There's at least a handful that I could count on my, off the top of my head right now, and I'm sure a couple more will be emerging. For me, it's hard to say best ever, just because I think best in a while probably. But
Fair.
I mean, just looking back to the 2018 class, I think it was alone in New York, you had Jeremy Ruckert at go to Ohio State. You had Matthew Jones go to Ohio State. You had Trill Williams go to Syracuse. Kadir White didn't end up working out for him, but he was, high 3, low 4-star prospect who ended up signing with Syracuse. Ahmad Anderson, obviously now at Temple, but, signed with Purdue. Aaron Cruikshank went to Wisconsin in that class. He didn't work out either, but Zahir Lacewell signed with Rutgers. Elijah Jones is still at Boston College. So those are 8 guys right there that I just rattled off, and that doesn't include, Rutgers signed Paul Woods. They signed Matthew Thomas. Gabe Warren went to Syracuse. Matt Valici went to Boston College. Stevie Scott went to Indiana. David Wagogo is now at Rutgers. He was at Temple. Christian Izzy and Kassan Abraham. I mean, I could keep rattling off names.
Right,
we're about 20. We're about 20 deep right there, right? That signed or are currently playing with Power 5 schools. So I'll say that is probably the best class in New York.
Fair. I didn't realize there was that many from that 2018 class. Wow, that's incredible.
That was a good class. Yeah. I remember going to the E-Hall signing day, and it was like,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Sean
6,
Ryan
7.
might have been in that class too, if I'm thinking about things correctly. He might have been the year before. I can't remember, but yeah. I mean, that was a really good class.
Yeah. So I mean, any parting thoughts? I think that's all we really got. It's a relatively quick one today.
No, man. I mean, I'm just excited. However this game goes, it goes. I hope Rutgers puts up a good fight. If they lose, but I know it's tough right now. I'll just say this to the fans. I know it's tough. Seeing the offensive output, especially the last couple weeks. But this team, don't give up on this team. I mean, this team has 3 wins already. Indiana's a winnable game. Northwestern's a winnable game.
Nebraska.
Michigan State's a winnable game. Maryland's a winnable game, right? So, am I forgetting anyone?
Nebraska.
Yeah, you just said Nebraska. Those are 4 or 5 winnable games. I mean, if they can, what did I just say, 5 games? If they could go 3-2 in those games, they're in a bowl. They're looking at 6-6. I know some people had them beating BC. I personally didn't, and I had them at 4-8 without beating BC, 5-7 with beating BC. But if they can come in and steal one of these other games somehow down the stretch, at this point, 6-6. I mean, that would be an incredible year in a season that at least I personally felt was going to be almost a transitional stepping stone year before Gavin Wimsatt. We really need to see something from Gavin Wimsatt at the quarterback position next year. So, that's what I would say to the fans listening is don't give up on this team regardless of what happens this weekend. I still think, this could be a really fun and exciting season for Rutgers.
All right, Alex, thanks for everything. And that's another edition of the Night Report podcast. Hit the subscribe button down below, and we'll see you guys soon.